Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Read and Reread. I am Angelia, and today it is time once again for Friday Reads. So this week I finished, I think I finished two books, and I'm almost done with the book I'm reading right now, which I'll talk about. And then another book that I just attended a discussion of it. I didn't really reread it just for this, but I'm going to talk about that in a minute. If it looks a little dark, the light has gone out in this room and we can't quite figure out what the problem is. I was trying to turn off the fan, but I turned off the light, and now I've got the fan off, but I can't get the light back on. Like the clickety clacker isn't clacking, and there's some weird specialty light bulbs up there. So we got to work on that. But so hopefully, I am lit within the darkness here, but we shall see. All right, on to the books. First of all, last week I was almost finished with the Moonstone, and then I finished it up. And I did enjoy this Victober reread. I read it a long, long time ago. I can see that my edition of it has, you see it's $5. I don't know where I got this, but way back when. And I remember enjoying it at the time, and I did enjoy it again. The things that I liked, okay, well, first of all, very brief synopsis. The Moonstone is a mystery, and it's considered one of the earliest full-length mystery novels. And it's mostly a theft mystery. There is a beautiful, very large diamond called the Moonstone. And at the beginning of the book, we learned that it was stolen from India by a British colonel named Herncastle. Herncastle is a man of dubious ethics and morality. He's sort of estranged from his family in later years, and everyone knows that he has this Moonstone, even though he won't admit it, and that he stole it. And so this is kind of a weird premise for a theft story, because the British family in possession of the Moonstone knows that it is already stolen. And over the decades, there is always a trio of Indian men who are always present around wherever the Moonstone happens to be. They are the guards of the Moonstone, and that job goes down through the generations. So, Herncastle attempts to visit his sister, who has a daughter who is coming of age named Rachel, and he is turned away. And this makes him very angry, and in his revenge, he leaves the Moonstone to Rachel, knowing that it will perpetrate chaos and misery. His sister kind of knows that this is going to happen when she hears that Rachel is going to receive the Moonstone, but I don't know, she can't stop it. So Rachel, on her 18th birthday, receives the Moonstone, and it is stolen that night. And it does cause chaos. Then we have a very, very long novel told with multiple narrators. They all are recounting the parts of the story that they play a role in, and how they interact with other characters, what they think happened. Different people know different amounts of information, which colors their perception of who they think might have stolen it, or have motive to steal it, or to hide pieces of information. There are red herrings. There are, wrong trails. There are misunderstandings. There's a love triangle. And so a lot of things happen. And in the end, we do find out what happened to the Moonstone. So what I liked the multiple narrators, because some of them were more entertaining than others. But we had Betteridge, who has sort of a butler kind of person who's been worked at the house for many, many years, serving first Rachel's mother, and then he's still there through Rachel's upbringing. And he has a grown daughter who also is a maid at the house. And the thing about Betteridge is his whole philosophy of life is centered around Robinson Crusoe. Robinson Crusoe functions like a Bible in his life, where he consults it when he's upset, when he's happy, when he's depressed, when he's confused, and whatever he opens it up to, he finds some passage that immediately illuminates the current situation. So very much like somebody who is always going around sharing Bible quotes, he's always going around with his Robinson Crusoe. And on that note, there is a very pointed criticism of, I think, what Wilkie Collins must have thought to be phony Christian behavior in this story, because we also have Miss Clack, who is judgmental, uptight, narrow-minded, and constantly plies everyone with religious booklets and tracts. And the booklets have hilarious topics like Satan is in your hairbrush, and she leaves them about, and then people collect them and they take them back to her house and give them back, and nobody ever openly confronts it, says, stop doing this. They just kind of keep gathering them up and giving them back to her, and she never progresses. She never changes her point of view. She's always wrong about everything, and she's played for laughs. There was an interesting preface in the book because it had it was published in 1868 and revised in 1871 by Wilkie Collins, and he explains in the foreword to his revision that he was very, very ill when he wrote the book to begin with, and he wrote it in serial installments, and his mother was dying, and he himself became very, very ill with what he calls rheumatic gout, but he felt like he must continue producing the story because his readers were expecting the installments. And he said that the whole section of Miss Clack really uplifted him to have something humorous to write during that long illness. And then the book was successful. After the installments, I don't know how they did it back then, but the pieces came out, and then they published the completed book. And then he came back a few years later and revised some sections. I don't know how big the changes are, so I'm not like an intense Wilkie Collins scholar, but he did do some revisions in 1871. But I thought that was interesting that the whole section of Miss Clack was sort of therapeutic for him when he was very ill. So anyway, the story goes along. It's pretty lengthy, and it probably could have used a little more editing on Colin's part or somebody's part, but the story does keep going along. And then there is what I would also think is one of the original Scooby-Doo type endings, where a bunch of extra stuff is revealed and happens, and right in the last 20 or so pages, a whole watershed of extra things happen and revelations and everything. So it was entertaining. I did enjoy reading it again. It's a good solid Victober choice for me, so I had fun with it. Okay, then the next book I read was for a book club, my book club that I've been in for many, many years, who kindly zoomed me into the discussion because this is my book club from when I lived in the Dallas area, and of course I moved this past year down to South Texas. So anyway, the book was Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen, and I already returned it to the library, but I'll put a picture up of it. And this is a current release, a new release. Counterfeit is about the counterfeit luxury handbag industry. And in this story, we have a woman whose name I have already forgotten, but I will put it on the screen. And she is a lawyer. Her husband she's Chinese American. Her husband is French. He is a surgeon. And they have a little boy named Henri, who is about to start preschool. But Henri seems to have some developmental delays. He's not really talking. He's very prone to tantrums. He's pretty difficult to, get out of the house, transitions, different things set him off. He has lots of meltdowns. And she relies very heavily on her nanny, Maria. Her husband gets a dream job at Stanford University, but this requires him to make a very long commute from their home in San Francisco to Palo Alto. So he decides to rent an apartment. And right here, I'm like, well, why don't they just move there? Because it's very clear from the outset that she is not real keen on going back to work to her law firm there in San Francisco. So I'm thinking, well, why don't you just move? And then if you want to go back to work, look at your opportunities there, because you're moving from one, well-connected, affluent community to another. It's not like there's not going to be any job prospects there, or if you're going to stay at home, then there you are. But no, that's not what happens. She gets back in touch with an old college roommate named Winnie. Now, Winnie was her roommate freshman year, but Winnie abruptly left during that year, citing a family emergency, and she hasn't been in contact with her since. And Winnie gets a hold of her and shows up. They meet, and Winnie seems very upscale. The way she's dressed, her shoes, her bags, she seems like a very much more polished person than she was back in college. And so she finds out gradually that Winnie is in the counterfeit handbag business. So she starts participating in this scheme. That's all I'm going to tell you, except that from the very beginning of the book, that she is narrating this and speaking to a detective. So at some point the law catches up with them, but then what actually is going to happen or how it unfolds, there's a couple of surprises. The story was very breezy, light. There was the kind of story you read it through very quickly, and then at the end you're like, well, wait a minute, well, what about this and what about that? I think it would play well as a movie where it just goes along and you don't stop and think too much about it. As a book, it kind of had too many holes in it for my liking, but it was, it was fun for us to have the conversation about the book and about that whole idea of like luxury goods and fraudulent luxury goods, and if your fraudulent item is indistinguishable from the real one, what does that really mean? And why do people choose to pay so much to begin with? And stuff like that. So it was kind of fun to talk about. So that was Counterfeit by Kirsten Chen. Then I refreshed my memory of Frankenstein by Mary Shelley to participate in another book club that I'm currently in, that is a banned book club at the public library. And this group reads classic books that have been banned for different reasons or challenged over the years. And the reason why they're focusing on classics is because they want to choose books that the library can produce enough multiple copies of so that anyone in the group can borrow a copy and not have to purchase one. So they're not really reading the most currently banned things that might be newer releases that maybe the library system only has one. This is a library system that has maybe 5 branches, so they're picking ones that that are going to be around. I have my own copy of Frankenstein, which is my lovely penguin cloth-bound classic. The part that I found the most interesting was just the whole talk about how science and scientists have been portrayed over the years in fiction, and how the notion of the uneasiness about scientists and their constant, striving to go further and, open new ground in different fields, how that always has caused conflict in society and is then represented in literature. So we were talking about, just the character of Victor Frankenstein, also the ship captain, Walton, who was a different kind of scientist and explorer, and then other books and movies that we had experienced that kind of also touch on this theme. So that's what I found the most interesting in that talk. Then I have been reading, and I'm almost finished with Hamnet by Maggie O'Farrell, and I am loving this book. Everybody who told me how good it was, and every video I've seen for like a year and a half about how extraordinary this book is, was totally correct, because I am loving this book. It's not very long, and it hasn't taken me very long to read. And I really am planning to finish it today or this evening, because I'm leaving for my trip tomorrow, and I want to start another book and not have one that just has a little end piece on it. So Hamnet, I guess everybody knows probably by now that Hamnet has to do with the family of a young William Shakespeare. Shakespeare is never named by his name in this book. He's always referred to as, the husband or the Latin tutor, and everybody else is referred to by their actual name, which is kind of interesting. But it's more about like who he is in relation to whoever is, whose point of view is being represented at that time. And it's mainly about Agnes, his wife, who is an extraordinary character in this book. Just a remarkable woman who's, she's eccentric, she's intuitive, she has some clairvoyant talents that she mostly tries to keep to herself, but not very successfully. And she just the love story between them, and then her fierce love for her children, her deep connection to the natural world. All these things are just really, really compelling. And it's a story of grief and loss, because it is not a spoiler. It's common knowledge that they had 3 children, and that Hamnet, their son, dies at the age of 11 of the plague. And in this story, we get the chronicle of both their story, their love story, and how they came together, and then also the story of Hamnet and his sister Judith becoming ill, and Hamnet ultimately dying, and then just the grief. There are just wonderfully vivid portraits of the time period, the life, what it was like in the house, down to all of the smells and the way the air felt. One of the best descriptions of childbirth that I have read in any novel. And also now I'm in the section of the immediate aftermath of Hamlet's death, and it's just very, very emotional. So I am loving this book, and I will have some kind of wrap-up comments on it next week when I have actually finished it. So I may not have another video until next Friday, because we're leaving tomorrow, and I'm not sure if I'll have time to film an extra one to schedule for an upload today, so I might just take a break, but I will be back next Friday. We're leaving tomorrow for our 30th anniversary trip, and I'm going to take Kindred by Octavia Butler for my book on this trip. I'm taking this book and a couple of magazines for the flight, and I should have things to say about it next week. The only thing I've read by Octavia Butler is Parable of the Talents, which I really, really loved. So I'm looking very much forward to reading Kindred. So that is the wrap up. You know what? I did not talk about TV shows like I usually do, but we are still watching the British Baking Show, which is not their greatest season, but it's still pretty good. We finished season 5 of Better Call Saul, and now we just have to wait for season 6 to be put onto Netflix. And then last night we watched the first episode of The Watcher, which was really weird. So we're gonna watch a little more and see if we like it or not. But I'm kind of a sucker for anything with Margot Martindale in it. So and she was very weird in the first episode. So we'll see how that goes. So that's all I have for now. I hope you have an excellent reading weekend. And if I don't make another video until next Friday, have a wonderful week, and I will check back with you soon. Thanks. If you like this video, please like and subscribe, and I will see you soon. Bye-bye.